Human life is not confined to the fragile duration of a single breath. As long as the breath flows, we call this state living. But when that breath ceases, we do not fall into nothingness. We simply pass through a doorway that we have named death. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, a text that has guided countless generations in the Himalayas, records what unfolds beyond that doorway. It is less a book about dying and more a manual on how consciousness travels, transforms, and chooses its next becoming. In this session, I invite you into the final passages of that journey, the ascent into the heavenly realm, the return to the human realm, and the descent into the Asura Realm, where anger and rivalry drive existence. These are not merely mythic cosmologies. They are metaphors, psychological maps, and existential diagnostics that speak to the deepest questions of Western philosophy. What shapes the soul? What directs our becoming? What kind of life generates what kind of afterlife? Life is not mere survival. Every moment, every thought, every word becomes the architecture for the next stage of our being. The Tibetan sages call this the law of cause and condition. Each mental state is a seed that will one day ripen. If you stay with this lecture to the end, a seed will germinate in your own mind, subtle yet transformative. Like the first crack of light that opens a celestial gate from within, the path of wisdom and compassion is not an esoteric ideal. It is a discipline and inward cultivation, a deliberate shaping of the soul's trajectory. By pressing subscribe and turning on notifications, you are not simply engaging with a channel. You are stepping intentionally into a long lineage of seekers who treat knowledge not as entertainment, but as spiritual nourishment that shapes the quality of their consciousness. In the final sections of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the wandering consciousness encounters three fundamental doorways. One leads toward hellish states shaped by cruelty, hatred, and despair. Another opens toward the realm of hungry ghosts, where insatiable craving dominates. A third invites the soul into the animal realm, where ignorance and instinct rule. Yet opposite these shadowed paths stands another direction, the luminous ascent known as the heavenly realm. Heaven, in this context, is not a place of eternal reward, but a refined vibration of consciousness. It is a realm reached by souls who have transcended cycles of anger, jealousy, and greed. It is the domain of those whose hearts have tilted, not toward self-advancement, but toward other-centeredness. In Western terms, we might say it is the life shaped by agape, moral clarity, and the quiet courage to act ethically even when no one is watching. The Tibetan text describes common traits among those who ascend to the heavenly realm: compassion, integrity, generosity without calculation, and wisdom that sees through illusion. These are individuals who carried another person's burden without expecting recognition. They healed pain they did not cause. They chose conscience over convenience. Their goodness was not a performance, but a habit of the heart, unforced and unpretentious. Consider the public servant or political leader. In the Tibetan view, their karmic destiny is determined not by their office, but by how they wielded it. Those who placed conscience above ambition, who used public funds to uplift the vulnerable rather than to benefit themselves, who asked not "Does this help my career?" but "Does this protect the people?" carry a light that is already aligned with heavenly order. After death, the fragrance of their integrity becomes a luminous guide that opens the celestial door. But those who seized power through manipulation, who cause suffering to maintain authority, will find that no celestial gate responds to their call. Consider the physician or nurse. The Tibetan tradition views healing not as a profession, but as a karmic relationship. Those who tended to the suffering with genuine care, who prioritized human life over exhaustion or profit, who did not abandon the patient, who could not pay, leave behind traces of compassion that endure beyond physical death. These traces crystallize into merit, drawing the soul into the realm, where celestial healers emerge, beings who mend not bodies, but the deeper ailments of consciousness. Consider the teacher. A true educator does not use the gifts of the student for personal advantage. They awaken potential, cultivate discernment, and teach not only knowledge but conscience. Their words illuminate the inner landscape of countless lives. And so, in the afterlife, their guiding presence evolves into a celestial instructor who leads other beings toward clarity, humility, and insight. Even ordinary workers and citizens participate in the making of the heavenly realm. Their virtues are quiet, almost invisible. They do not steal what is not theirs. They share the modest fruits of their labor. They endure difficulty with sincerity rather than bitterness. These ordinary acts accumulate like droplets forming a clear lake. The Tibetan masters say small virtues, gathered without pride, become the path to the heavens. Though their lives appear simple, their hearts are light. When death comes, consciousness rises naturally into a world free from suffering. The same logic extends to personality. Those who are gentle, who restrain anger rather than act upon it, carry the foundational resonance of the heavenly realm. Gratitude purifies the mind, resentment pollutes it. The person who forgives rather than clings to injury mirrors the divine mind more closely than they may realize. The one who desires little and gives much becomes the wellspring from which others drink. And this generativity draws the soul upward. In the Tibetan cosmology, heaven is not a reward granted by an external deity. It is the crystallization of one's inner state. It is a world made of light, formed from the purified vibrations of the mind itself. Jealousy cannot survive there. Comparison dissolves. Inhabitants rejoice in the joy of others, because their own peace has no need for competition. The air of that realm is made of generosity. The ground is shaped by wisdom. Only those who live from a sincere center of goodness can breathe its atmosphere. When we hear these teachings through the lens of Western philosophy and psychology, we might interpret them as a profound commentary on moral development. The Tibetan heavenly realm resembles what Abraham Maslow called self-transcendence, what Thomas Aquinas named the purified intellect, and what modern psychologists describe as post-egoic consciousness. It is the fulfillment of the human capacity for compassion, agency, and moral clarity. To contemplate the heavenly realm is to confront the question, what kind of person am I becoming through my daily choices, my habitual thoughts, my quiet behaviors when no one observes? Death does not erase who we have been. It reveals who we have become. This is why the Tibetan Book of the Dead is ultimately a mirror. It does not ask us to fear judgment. It asks us to understand causality. The afterlife is shaped by the unfinished work of the inner life. And so, as you continue on this journey with me, consider subscribing not as a digital gesture, but as a small vow to keep exploring the deeper architecture of consciousness. Each lecture, each reflection, each act of attention becomes a step along the path that leads from confusion to clarity, from self-centeredness to compassion, from ordinary awareness to the threshold of the heavenly realm. If the Tibetan masters are right, the journey beyond death begins long before death itself. It begins right now in the quality of the next thought you allow to arise. A path beyond heaven, the great return to the human realm. A philosophical narrative inspired by the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Ladies and gentlemen, When we speak about heavenly realms, the Deva worlds described in Buddhist cosmology, our imagination often paints them as final sanctuaries, places where bliss is permanent and reward is everlasting. Yet the ancient wisdom of the Bardo Thodol, known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, insists on a profound truth. Even heavenly merit is impermanent. This is not a tragic message, nor is it meant to diminish the value of goodness. Instead, it reminds us of a central principle of Buddhist psychology and cosmology: no conditioned state, no matter how radiant, is free from change. Even in heaven, the flame of bliss eventually flickers. The merit that lifted the soul upward burns away, and the journey through existence continues. In other words, the Deva realms are not retirement homes for the righteous. They are rest stops on a much longer pilgrimage, a pilgrimage toward liberation itself. And so we are reminded, do not cling even to heaven. Seek the wisdom that transcends it. This message is startling to many Western listeners, especially those raised within a framework where heaven is the ultimate reward and the end of the story. But Buddhism, like many mystical traditions, tells us something different. The ultimate goal is not comfort, but awakening, a transformation of consciousness so complete that one no longer cycles through birth and death at all. A single act of kindness, the true gate of the heavenly realm. My friends, do not misunderstand heaven as a distant kingdom, accessible only to saints and sages. In spiritual terms, heaven begins in a single moment of genuine goodness. If today, just today, you refuse to hate someone, even when you felt justified, if today you helped someone sincerely, without calculation, without waiting for applause, without personal gain, then at that moment, you were already knocking on the gates of the heavenly realm. For the Buddha taught, heaven is not up there. Heaven blooms at the center of a purified mind. This is not poetry, it is psychology. Every time you choose compassion over resentment, honesty over deceit, and gratitude over entitlement, you shift the architecture of your consciousness. You lighten the karmic weight that holds the soul down. You reshape your next life. Thus, when you keep your mind clear, your words sincere, and your actions upright, you are not simply being good. You are building the bridge that guides your soul toward the world of light. The human realm, the most precious and perilous of all. Now we turn to the second great path, described in the doctrine of the six realms, the human realm, 人间道. In Buddhist cosmology, there are six possible rebirths. In hell 地狱, two hungry ghosts, 异鬼, 三 animals, 畜生, four asuras, 阿修罗, titans driven by conflict, four humans, 人间, six devas, heavenly beings, 天上. The human realm is the fifth, and in many ways it is the most extraordinary. Why? Because only here, only as humans, can we consciously shape our karma. Only here can we reflect, question, contemplate, and transform. Hell does not allow reflection. Animal life does not permit philosophical inquiry. The heavenly realms are too blissful to inspire deep spiritual work. But humans, we are balanced between pleasure and suffering, between wisdom and ignorance, between virtue and temptation. This unique blend makes us capable of ethical growth, psychological insight, and eventually spiritual liberation. To be born human is considered a rare opportunity, not a reward, but a classroom. However, not everyone earns this opportunity. To be born human requires a specific karmic mixture, neither overwhelmingly good nor overwhelmingly evil. A person who becomes human again is someone who, in a past life, practiced compassion but not fully, restrained greed but not entirely, helped others but also used others for personal gain, spoke truth sometimes but not always, attempted virtue yet clung to ego. In other words, humans are beings in moral tension, and that tension is precisely what produces growth. The human realm through professions, karmic examples. Let us explore how the karma of the human realm appears through different professions. 1. Public officials, those caught between duty and compromise. A civil servant is often someone who, in a previous life, genuinely desired to serve the public good but made compromises when challenges arose. They upheld the law yet sometimes surrendered to convenience. They protected justice yet followed hierarchy against their conscience. They served people yet occasionally served themselves. Thus they return to the human realm, carrying the lesson. What is true justice? How do I act rightly when the world pushes me toward convenience? Their task in this life is to rediscover integrity, not as an ideal, but as a lived reality. 2. Entrepreneurs, souls tested by wealth and responsibility. An entrepreneur is someone whose past life held a blend of generosity and desire. They pursued wealth, yes, but they also created opportunity for others. In their hearts, greed and compassion coexisted. They are reborn human to learn the most difficult balance, to have wealth without being owned by it. Should greed prevail again, their next destination is not the human realm, but the realm of hungry ghosts, beings consumed by endless craving. 3. Teachers and scholars. The karma of knowledge and ego. Teachers and scholars carry karma connected to knowledge. In a past life, they used learning to uplift others, but also allowed pride to control them. They fell into asmimana, the I know arrogance, the belief that one's intellect grants superiority. In Buddhist psychology, this is called eisangwoxiang, a mistaken belief in a solid, separate, self-righteous ego. Such individuals are reborn as humans, so they may learn. True teaching is not display. True knowledge is humility. 4. Artists and writers, wanderers of emotion and attachment. Artists return to the human realm because they lived past lives full of deep emotion, much of it beautiful, some of it painful, and much of it obsessive. They sought truth in expression, but also fame, recognition, and validation. Their art was intertwined with attachment. Thus they return as humans to transform attachment into creativity, pain into insight, emotion into liberation. 5. Doctors and nurses, compassion that was almost complete. Medical workers belong to souls who once practiced compassion sincerely, but whose purity of intention was not absolute. Perhaps they healed others but held pride in their healing. Perhaps they served but expected recognition. Perhaps they felt compassion but only for those they preferred. So they are reborn human to learn. What is compassion that expects nothing? What is service that is free from self? Their task is to refine their hearts until compassion becomes natural, effortless, unconditional. The human realm through personality, the psychology of rebirth. Karma does not only shape profession, it shapes temperament as well. 1. The perfectionist. A perfectionist is someone who, in a past life, valued order and righteousness, but lacked the capacity for forgiveness. Rigid moral purity becomes its own form of bondage. Such a soul is reborn human in order to learn. Imperfection is not failure. Imperfection is the beginning of compassion. 2. The avoidant personality. Avoidant individuals, once avoided responsibility or turned away from the suffering of others. Thus their task in this life is to learn, to face pain rather than flee from it, to meet life rather than hide from it. 3. The angry or aggressive personality. These are souls who once carried the energy of the Asura Realm, driven by conflict, rivalry, and pride. Their rebirth as humans is a chance to learn how to turn strength into protection rather than aggression, how to tame the fire rather than be consumed by it. 4. The self-sacrificing but unwise empath. These are souls once close to the heavenly realms, gentle, compassionate, giving, but their compassion lacked wisdom, so they fell into self-neglect and imbalance. Such souls return as humans to learn. Compassion must be paired with clarity. Love requires boundaries. Giving without wisdom becomes self-destruction. This lesson is essential not only for spiritual growth, but for mental health. The human realm, your greatest chance for transformation. And so, the human realm, far from being an ordinary life, is the greatest spiritual opportunity of all. Here we suffer. Here we hope. Here we fail. Here we rise again. Here we learn. Here we transform. Heaven is peaceful, but passive. Hell is painful, but overwhelming. Only humans can choose. Only humans can change karma midstream. Only humans can aim for liberation itself. And so I say to you, live this human life with awareness. Treat each struggle as your teacher. Treat each moment as a sacred chance to awaken. Every choice you make, every word, every intention, every moment of clarity shapes not only your present life, but the architecture of your next existence. Live well, and the path ahead becomes bright. Live wisely, and the heavens open. Live with insight, and liberation draws near. The karma of violence and the fate of the returning soul. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our exploration of the Buddhist cosmology of rebirth, let us now turn to one of the most unsettling but essential questions raised in the ancient texts. If a wrathful person, someone who, in a past life, killed many people as a hired assassin, were to be reborn as a human again, would that person live a happy life, or would misery follow them like a shadow? This question forces us to confront one of Buddhism's most uncompromising teachings, the principle of karma, the law of cause and effect. In the words of the Buddha, whatever seed you plant, that is the fruit you shall harvest. Karma does not vanish, it matures, always. Let us begin with the conclusion first, stated plainly. A person who has taken lives, whether through murder, war, atrocities, or hired violence, may indeed be reborn in the human realm, but happiness will not be granted to them, even if they walk among us with a human appearance. Their life becomes a long process of repaying the spiritual debt of harm they inflicted. Not a life of reward, but a life of rebalancing, of karmic accounting. Why? Because in Buddhist ethics, taking a life is not merely an act of physical harm. It is the severing of an entire web of relationships, memories, dreams, and futures. In every life lost, there are parents who raised that person, children who depended on them, friends shaped by their presence, teachers who guided them, communities connected through shared stories. To extinguish even one life is to tear countless threads from the fabric of existence. This is why ancient texts say, to kill one life is to disturb 1,000 rivers. This is why violent karma, especially murder, is considered one of the heaviest burdens a soul can carry. 2. So how could a murderer be born human? Again, this may seem contradictory. If taking lives is so heavy a sin, why would a killer not fall straight into the hell realms? Why might he ever return as a human? The answer lies in a deeper understanding of karma. No soul is purely good or purely evil. Most beings carry a mixture of light and shadow. Even the cruelest person may have given to the poor in an earlier life, protected a monk or a sacred place, helped a stranger, practiced compassion in a different incarnation. In Buddhist philosophy, these good actions do not disappear. They remain like a reservoir of merit. And sometimes that reservoir is strong enough to pull the soul upward, not into heaven, but into the middle world, the human realm. But, and this is essential, being reborn human is not a reward. It is the setting of a stage for repayment, for purification. Human birth becomes the crucible where suffering is not punishment, but transformation. 3. The three forms of suffering for those who killed in past lives. Ancient Buddhist texts, along with the testimonies of many meditators and spiritual practitioners, tell us that souls burdened with violent karma tend to reappear in the human world in three primary ways. Let us examine each. 1. They are born with illness or die young. Because they once cut short another's life, their own life force becomes unstable. They may suffer chronic illness since childhood, endure unexplained medical conditions, fight constant fatigue or frailty, or die suddenly in an accident at a young age. This is not cosmic revenge, it is the balancing of life energy. Buddhism sees life as a shared ecosystem of vitality. When one disturbs that ecosystem, especially by ending life, the disturbance returns internally. The karmic principle is simple. What you interrupt in others, you will experience in yourself. 2. They live with deep fear, paranoia, or violent impulses. The second form of karmic return shows up psychologically. Why? Because someone who caused death carries the imprint of death within their consciousness. That imprint does not vanish with physical death. It travels with the subtle mind into the next life. Thus, in the human realm, these individuals often live in chronic anxiety, fear being watched or hunted, suffer nightmares or intrusive memories, feel irrational danger in everyday situations, or struggle with anger they cannot understand or control. This is not merely trauma carried from childhood. It is spiritual memory, echoes of the fear they once caused others. In Buddhism, this is known as the returning shadow. 3. They experience broken relationships and emotional isolation. The deepest wound caused by killing is not only the loss of life, it is the breaking of relational karma. The result, in their next life, they often fail to maintain stable relationships, hurt those they love without meaning to, experience sudden family tragedies, lose friends despite trying to connect, or feel a permanent sense of emptiness and loneliness, because they once severed the most fundamental bond, the bond of life. The universe mirrors that severing back to them in the form of isolation. This is why texts say, the killer walks the world as if carrying a shadow no one else can see. 4. Realistic illustrations of this karmic law. Let us examine some examples, derived from Buddhist interpretations of karmic patterns. Case 1. The former gang enforcer, a man who once killed under orders, is reborn as the father of a child lost to a sudden accident. He now feels the unbearable pain that someone else once felt because of him. The universe is not punishing him. It is educating him. Case 2. The war criminal reborn as a peace activist. A soldier who committed mass violence may be reborn with a deep longing for peace. Yet throughout his life, he repeatedly encounters violence, witnesses conflict, or is placed in crisis situations. Why? Because the violent energy he created still lingers, circling him like an unfinished echo. Case 3. The rich hitman reborn into poverty. A man who gained wealth through killing may be reborn into a life where his parents suffer chronic illness. He spends his entire life working to pay medical bills, or he himself becomes a victim of violence. This is not divine punishment. It is the returning wave of energy that he once set into motion. 5. But Buddhism is not a philosophy of eternal damnation. Now, let us pause. It is essential to understand that Buddhism does not condemn anyone forever. There is no eternal hell, no hopeless sinner, even someone who has taken life. Even someone who has committed grave atrocities can purify their karma through sincere repentance, protecting life, acts of compassion, prayer, or dedicating their energy to healing others. In this way, suffering becomes not a cage, but a doorway. Pain becomes not a punishment, but a teacher. This is the heart of the human realm. It is the world where transformation is possible. In heaven, beings are too comfortable to change. In hell, beings are too overwhelmed to awaken. But here, in the fragile balance of human life, we can turn darkness into light. And so even a former killer can begin to undo the knots of their past. Mundane 4. 6. The human realm. Not heaven, not hell, but a crucible. So what ultimately is the human realm? It is the in-between world, a world where happiness and suffering coexist, a world where karmic seeds sprout visibly, a world where awakening becomes possible. For someone who committed grave violence in another life, human birth is not a blessing, but a chance to confront and transform their own shadow. They will likely face illness, loss, fear, instability, emotional pain. But if they use these experiences wisely, with humility, repentance, and compassion, they can break the chain of suffering. The cycle of karma begins to loosen. The moment a soul says sincerely, "I see what I have done. May my suffering become the lesson that ends the suffering of others." Let me summarize this in clear terms. Yes, a murderer can be reborn as a human, but no, they will not live a happy life. Their life becomes a process of karmic repayment and purification. They walk through the world wearing the shell of a human, but carrying the shadow of their past actions. Through suffering, introspection, and acts of compassion, they can finally free themselves from karmic chains. This is the profound moral architecture of Buddhist thought. Suffering is not the end, it is the beginning of wisdom. My friends, in the Buddhist cosmology of the 6 realms, there exists a world that feels strangely familiar to us. Not because we have seen it, but because, in many ways, we live like its inhabitants. This is the Asura Realm, a realm of warriors, conquerors, and leaders, a realm filled with ambition, jealousy, honor, and endless conflict. It is one of the most fascinating mirrors of the human condition. Today, we will explore what it truly means to be an Asura, not as a mythical being with supernatural strength, but as a psychological and ethical archetype that still walks among us. And perhaps, by the end of this talk, we may recognize a part of ourselves in this ancient description, and discover a path to transform that fire into something wiser, calmer, and more compassionate. 1. What is the Asura Realm? In Buddhist tradition, Asuras are powerful beings stronger than humans, but burdened by desires too heavy to ascend to the realm of the gods. They are often called beings of fire because their minds burn with anger and competition. The gods of conflict because they fight endless battles in pursuit of victory. Asuras originally lived in the heavens, but they were cast out after challenging the gods out of jealousy and rage. That fall from heaven caused not by weakness, but by pride is one of the most profound metaphors in all Eastern philosophy. An Asura looks noble, courageous, and even righteous on the outside, but inside their minds are restless, insecure, and constantly comparing themselves to others. When such beings are reborn in the human realm, they appear in familiar roles: political leaders, soldiers and warriors, business magnates, prosecutors and judges, religious leaders, or simply individuals driven by pride, jealousy, and relentless competition. In other words, the Asura realm is not some distant mythological battlefield. It is a spiritual description of human psychology under the rule of ego. 2. The karma that leads to the Asura Realm. What kind of actions create the karmic momentum toward the Asura path? Buddhism describes several patterns. 1. Fierce competitiveness and the obsession to win. 2. Self-righteousness, believing one is always correct. 3. Manipulating others for power, reputation, or influence. 4. Anger disguised as justice. 5. Jealousy and resentment toward others' success. Interestingly, asuras also perform good deeds, but their virtue is poisoned by self-centered intention. They help others to look superior. They protect justice to prove their own strength. They give, but only to gain recognition. Because their good actions are rooted in ego rather than compassion, their accumulated merit cannot elevate them to the realm of the gods. Instead, it anchors them in the realm of noble suffering, the Asura Realm. 3. How Asura karma appears in modern professions. Let us reinterpret traditional Buddhist teachings through contemporary examples, so Western audiences may understand this archetype more vividly. 1. The politician power, mistaken for moral purpose. Many political leaders embody the Asura pattern. They proclaim, "I fight for the people," but in truth, their greatest fear is losing influence. Behind every speech about justice often lies strategies to undermine rivals, campaigns built on hostility, a constant search for dominance. Such individuals may rise high during their lifetime, but according to Buddhist teaching, the karma of manipulation and conflict leads them after death into a realm where conflict never ends. 2. Soldiers, police, and organized warriors. Not all warriors are asuras, but those who glorify violence, who suppress others with force, or who kill without remorse, accumulate the karma of blood and anger. When such individuals die, Buddhist cosmology teaches that they awaken in a realm, like a vast battlefield, a place where no war ever ends and no victor ever truly wins. 3. Business leaders and corporate titans. In the human world, the Asura spirit often hides beneath ambition and achievement. These individuals live in flames of competition. I must be number one. I must defeat my rivals. I cannot tolerate anyone above me. They create great industries and innovations, but their inner motivation is not compassion, it is conquest. Thus, the karmic energy they generate may lead them to a realm that reflects their internal struggle, an eternal marketplace where a stronger competitor always appears to destroy what they built. 4. Prosecutors and legal enforcers. A legal system built on justice without compassion can become a battlefield of righteousness. Those who punish without introspection, who judge others harshly while overlooking their own flaws, become asuras in robes. After death, the teachings say, they stand in judgment before the very laws. They wield it against others. 5. Religious leaders. Perhaps the most tragic asuras are found in religion. These are spiritual leaders who use faith as an instrument of fear, condemn other beliefs, manipulate followers, preach righteousness while lacking compassion. Their anger becomes their doctrine, and their pride becomes their god. When such leaders die, they fall into a realm where their own dogma burns them like fire. 4. Asura personalities in everyday life. Even without grand titles or careers, some individuals carry the Asura temperament within them. The angry type, quick to explode, unable to calm themselves, and convinced that emotional force equals moral rightness. The jealous type, unable to celebrate others' success, always comparing, always competing. Their life becomes a prison of insecurity. The competitive type, they feel alive only when fighting. Rest feels like failure. They win battles but lose peace. The self-righteous type, everything becomes a debate. Every conversation becomes a battlefield. They cannot see beyond the narrow walls of their own ego. These people appear strong, but their strength is brittle. Inside, they face constant fear because ego requires endless defense. 5. The karma of the Asura Realm. Endless war without victory. Buddhist cosmology paints a vivid picture. Asuras live in palaces more beautiful than those of the gods. They possess power, resources, and brilliance, yet their minds are volcanoes erupting with envy and aggression. They see someone slightly more radiant than themselves and instantly ignite into rage. They march to war. They fight. They bleed. The battle ends. And then they prepare for the next one. Forever. There is no peace in the Asura realm because the ego can never be satisfied. Victory only breeds fear of losing. Power only increases insecurity. Success only heightens jealousy. This realm is a psychological allegory, a warning about where unrestrained ambition leads the human heart. 6. The human experience of the Asura pattern. When an Asura is reborn as a human being, the cycle continues. Success brings pressure. Love becomes possession. Failure becomes humiliation. Life becomes a roller coaster of triumph and despair. They rise quickly but fall even faster. They achieve much but enjoy little. Their hearts oscillate endlessly between pride and shame, love and hatred, courage and insecurity, ambition and burnout. This is the human Asura's tragedy. They can conquer the world, yet never conquer themselves. 7. Liberation, when an Asura discovers compassion. But Buddhism is never fatalistic. No matter how deep our anger or ambition runs, there is always a path toward liberation. The Buddha taught, anger is sharper than the sword. Jealousy is deeper than poison. But when the mind turns toward compassion, even the Asura becomes divine. The moment an Asura cultivates compassion, even a single sincere moment, the fire that tormented them begins to cool. The battlefield disappears. Their armor falls away, and the path to liberation opens. What does this look like in practice? Transforming anger into patience. Transforming jealousy into appreciation. Transforming self-righteousness into humility. Transforming competition into cooperation. Transforming ego into service. When an Asura discovers the power of compassion, their realm transforms into a heaven. This is the profound hope embedded within Buddhist cosmology. No one is condemned forever. Even the fiercest warrior can become a protector of peace. Conclusion: the Asura within us. The Asura realm is not a distant myth. It is a magnified reflection of human nature, our ambition, our pride, our jealousy, our insecurity. Some of us burn quietly, some of us burn loudly, but all of us carry a bit of Asura fire within. The question is not whether we possess these flames, but whether we let them consume us, or transform them into warmth, courage, and compassion. If we choose the latter, then even the karma of the Asura becomes a path, not to endless war, but toward awakening. The realm of the Asuras, a mirror, not a myth. When ancient Buddhist texts speak of the Asura realm, many Western listeners imagine a mythological battlefield populated by jealous demigods. But in the philosophical reading, especially as interpreted through the Bardo, Thirdol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Asuras are not monsters from a distant cosmos. They are psychological states we already know all too well. The Asura world is the realm where anger wears the mask of righteousness, where envy disguises itself as ambition, and where life's battles feel endless, because they are fought not against others, but against one's own unquiet mind. In these teachings, those who descend into the Asura realm are not wicked. In the conventional moralistic sense, they are individuals who, during life, consistently climbed upward by pushing others downward, justified their fury as a form of justice, sharpened their jealousy into motivation. Strong spirits, yes, but restless ones, driven, ferocious, forever unsatisfied. In the symbolic geography of the Bardo, their afterlife becomes a continuation of this internal war, an endless campaign in which no victory ever brings peace. And yet, and this is the heart of the teaching, the fire that torments can also illuminate. Anger, when transformed by compassion, becomes clarity. Jealousy, when dissolved by wisdom, becomes aspiration. The same flame that burns can, in an instant, become the light by which one sees. This is the paradox the Tibetan sages wished us to understand. There is no divine judge. There is only the architecture we build with our actions. In other words, the map of rebirth is drawn by one's own hand. This is not fatalism. This is responsibility, radical responsibility. Rebirth not as afterlife, but as immediate ethical law. To Western ears, rebirth often sounds like a theory about what happens after death. But in the Bardo teachings, rebirth is not primarily about the next lifetime. It is about this moment right now. Every thought is a seed. Every intention is a doorway. Every action is a vibration that constructs a world we must eventually walk into. Thus, a moment of hatred opens the gates of a personal hell. A moment of greed amplifies the hunger of the hungry ghost. A moment of clarity, kindness, or sincerity returns us to our humanity or even to the celestial mind known as heaven. The Tibetan Book of the Dead states, rebirth is not a distant event. Each moment's mind has already chosen the path. The 6 realms, hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, asura, and heaven, are therefore not metaphysical locations. They are states of consciousness we move through dozens of times each day. When we resent the success of others, we taste the Asura world. When we are consumed by regret or shame, we enter the lower realms. When we act with compassion even though we are exhausted, we touch the heavens. This is not a cosmology. This is a psychology of freedom. The Book of the Dead as a manual for the living. While the text is traditionally read to the dying, its real purpose, the sages say, is for those who still breathe. Only a person who has contemplated death deeply can live without fear. Only someone who has witnessed their own impermanence can love without clinging. Only someone who has seen the transience of anger can choose peace over pride. Thus, the heart of the teaching is simple. To learn death is to learn life, and to recognize the original light, that innate clarity at the core of consciousness, is to become free even while living. This is what the text calls liberation. It is no surprise that Carl Jung, one of the founding figures of Western psychology, found in this book a profound map of the psyche. Today, it continues to influence research on near-death experiences, death meditation, and the philosophy of consciousness. It stands at a remarkable crossroads, where ancient spirituality meets modern psychology, and where the mystery of death becomes a lens through which the meaning of life is revealed, a journey we will walk together. In this lecture series, we will explore the stages of the Bardo, the Buddhist understanding of rebirth, and the philosophy of freedom that emerges when we face death without fear. If you are someone who seeks a deeper understanding of life's meaning, or if you feel drawn to explore what lies beyond, death not as superstition but as philosophy, I invite you to join this journey. Please subscribe so that we can walk this path together. As the Tibetan Book of the Dead reminds us, heaven is not above. It appears whenever the mind becomes clear. Each time you show restraint rather than anger. Each time you forgive when resentment feels easier. Each time you help someone without expecting praise. You are already knocking on the gate of the heavenly realm. Even the darkest actions can be purified through genuine remorse. Even the most corrosive jealousy can turn into wisdom. The 6 realms do not lie above the clouds or beneath the earth. They unfold here, in the geography of the human heart. May today's reflection shift your tomorrow, and may your tomorrow cultivate the light that guides the soul. If this lecture has helped you, I invite you to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications, so we may continue this journey toward clarity and liberation together. Sometimes a single click made with sincere intention can become a small act of goodness that brightens the path ahead. In our next session, we will explore the first stage of the Bardo, the moment of death and the encounter with the primordial light. Thank you for walking this path with me.